you can feel yourself not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on probation, not as something that has arrived here by fluke, but you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental. I'm not trying to sell you on this idea in the sense of converting you to it. I want you to play with it. I want you to think of its possibilities. I'm not trying to prove it. I'm just putting it forward as a possibility of life to think about. So then, let's suppose that you were able every night to dream any dream you wanted to dream. And that you could, for example, have the power within one night to dream 75 years of time, or any length of time you wanted to have. And you would naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes. You would have every kind of pleasure you could conceive. And after several nights of 75 years of total pleasure each, you would say, well, that was pretty great. But now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under control, where something is going to happen to me that I don't know what it's going to be. And you would dig that and come out of that and say, wow, that was a close shave, wasn't it? Then you would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now. You would dream the dream of living the life that you are actually living today. That would be within the infinite multiplicity of choices you would have, of playing that you weren't God. Because the whole nature of the Godhead, according to this idea, is to play that He's not.
Morena, namaste. I could not be more happy, honored, and humbled to be here today with all of you, and grateful to acknowledge my Maori brothers and sisters, with whom my family for 5 generations has shared the spirit and vision that is New Zealand. A king in the 12th century was presented with a beautiful game of chess. The king was so pleased, he asked what he could offer as a reward. The inventor modestly asked for some rice, the exact quantity to be calculated in a very simple formula. Put a single grain on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, and so on, doubling the amount with each square on the chessboard. The king readily agreed until he realized he'd been deceived. By mid-chessboard, his castle was barely big enough to contain the grains of rice, and with the first square of the second half of the chessboard, the amount would suddenly be doubled yet again. Now, this story has been used by everyone from scientists to scholars to exemplify the power of exponential consequences, wherein things start small, but once they begin to build, they evolve quickly and at a fantastic rate. Why is this story important to me? Why has it been on my mind lately, this thought? Well, because we're living in an exponential world. We live in a world where technology innovation is happening at speed and rate that we never imagined. The exponential rate of the way the world is networked is becoming more complex, more layered, and more interconnected in ways we never foresaw and couldn't imagine. And in some ways, the more we become connected, the less our communities become functional. And while the concept of exponentiality is important in the first half of the chessboard, by the second half of the chessboard, which is where we are today, the acceleration and magnitude becomes almost incomprehensible for us. And it's not just the sheer velocity of change that's concerning. It's not our only challenge. Soon, we will be surrounded by an environment itself that's going to be able to think, create, and learn faster than we can. Who will we be in that landscape? How do we ensure our humanity carries forward? You know, we've been taught to be experts. We go to school to learn to be an expert, the originator, the genesis of original thought. But when suddenly we no longer hold that position, who will we be? Humanizing our future seems to me to be of an utmost and critical priority as we move forward to the second half of the chessboard. Now, in 1970, a futurist, I want you to note that year because it's important. 1970, Alvin Toffler, in his book Future Shock, wrote, "The illiterate of the 21st century, they're not going to be those of us who can't read and write. They are going to be those of us who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And here we are, 50 years later, nearly 50 years later. Those words seem so prophetic to where we're standing at this second half of the chessboard. Now, many of us think that the people with the highest level of technical education, formal education, technologists graduating from places like MIT and Stanford, they are going to be the most successful in this new landscape that we're facing. Well, I believe something radically different. In fact, I believe that it is going to be women. And not just any women. I believe it's going to be illiterate and semi-literate women coming from some of the most remote, poor, resource, and stretched places on our planet. Women who are invisible and largely underestimated, who just might be the best able to lead us into the future with their ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn fearlessly without the hindrance of a heavy formal learning education. In fact, I think it's going to be our ability to adapt that will be of our utmost value in the future, an ability to learn fluidly, fearlessly, and in nearly a constant state of facing the unknown that is going to be our most valuable tool. Now, Barefoot College, the organization which I am blessed to lead today, is a hybrid social enterprise. It's an extraordinary organization, a place where words like social justice and inclusion are not words, they're a way of life, a place where innovation isn't something we do, it is something we are in a living, breathing sense. For 47 years, we have been working to solve some of the world's most pressing challenges for poor rural communities, helping them to become more self-reliant and sustainable, combining innovation, opportunity, resourcefulness, and a systems change approach towards scaling solutions that address access to energy, education, water and sanitation, health, and rural enterprises, connecting the dots between development and economic prosperity. Respecting, most importantly, the skills and wisdom and abundance that already exist in rural communities, instead of looking at what doesn't exist. It was founded and continues today to work in the lifestyle and work style of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, Gandhi was the original environmentalist. He believed in all things sustainable, both in the way we treat our economic resources, but more importantly, the way we treat our human resources. He believed and was dedicated to serving the last man, that the job wasn't done till the last man was touched, the last man was included. Well, I'd like to say I am here to make sure that Barefoot College today is reaching the last woman. In the last 5 years, my team and I have spent the majority of our time working on designing learning experiences for women earning less than $2 a day in order that they can achieve some economic prosperity, because we ultimately believe that without economic independence, women cannot play the role they need and must play in their communities. We have learned incredible things with and through them. Now, most of you live in a world where technology and your relationship with it is how it can make your life easier, more entertaining, more comfortable, and somehow more efficient. But the world I live in is a very different world. The world I live in is a world where nearly half the planet's population does not have access to a light. They live on less than $2.50 a day, and where millions of people annually, 3 million people a day, in fact, are migrating due to loss of livelihood from climate change, conflict, radicalized behavior, and no economic activity. For 1.6 billion people in the world without access to energy or a light, it's a world where women are obliged to cook, like in this picture, holding a mobile phone in their mouth, somebody with a lighter over their shoulder or a candle next to them, just to keep animals and bugs from going into their food. It's a place where children attempt to do schoolwork by a candle or a kerosene lantern, spewing out black caustic smoke from poor quality kerosene. In fact, the #1 killer of women in the world today is the inhalation of black smoke like this. Where illiterate people save the numbers they need to use every day using symbols like butterflies and flowers, because the technology we have access to isn't designed for people who don't happen to be literate or numerate. In my world, the odds are stacked against women. Their social situations and environments often set up to make failure almost inevitable. Many, in fact most, have given up on learning because they have simply never had the opportunity to master something beyond their imagination or their experience. 10 years ago, we began training illiterate and semi-literate women to be barefoot solar engineers. We began training men, actually, was a mixed group, the first class. It didn't go well. It didn't go well. It turns out we've come to believe that men in the developing world are largely untrainable. They're restless, they're mobile. You train them on something, give them a certificate, and they run to the nearest city. They leave the village. They want to monetize their skill. What a surprise, women, we live to serve. We care about the quality of life for everybody we love and care about. We want our children to thrive, and so we stay in the community when we learn something, and we teach that thing on. So we build on this abundance in the Women's Solar Engineering program, and it's why today we only train women. Women have a different motivation for many things they do, and they have a real need and desire to share their knowledge with others, which we all know. And so we work with that abundance in a variety of ways that really have come to drive the impact of this program. Today, across 4 barefoot colleges in the world, based in India and sub-Saharan Africa, we bring women together who cannot read and write, who've many of them never been in formal education, for 6 months to live and learn by doing together side by side. Now imagine, 10 countries, no common language, they've never left their communities before. Imagine the bravery. Just imagine the courage it takes to end up in India from Burkina Faso, or from the Pacific Islands in the winter in Rajasthan in the desert. There's not a fish or a sea in sight. It's incredible courage. I'm not sure any of us would have the courage to do that. If I showed up in your community and I said, would you like to come to India for 6 months? And they put their hand in the air. It's extraordinary. Using a unique curriculum that we've developed, which shatters the barrier of literacy. We have a tremendous partnership with Apple. Since 5 years, they've helped me to integrate high technology into what many would have referred to as a low technology program. And what I've seen come out of that collaboration and what they've learned about their hardware is really transformational. Our solar mamas are the village solar engineers. They fabricate, and when I say fabricate, they're building this circuit board, 196 pieces go on that circuit board. This is not light technology. Fabricate, install, maintain, repair, and and serve their communities as ongoing maintenance and repair engineers, bringing better health, better opportunity, better economic opportunities to everyone in their whole community. So the impact is intense. The solar mamas are a new kind of professional. So this is what a household looks like after it's been lit up by a solar mama. So it's completely lit. She faces a series of challenges every single day that she's never seen before. Every day she's seeing something utterly new, utterly different, and scary. And she never cops out. They never say we're not coming to class. They never say we don't want to learn that. They just face that new learning day after day after day after day. And they really have redefined rural professionalism because they define it through words like confidence, competence, and belief in themselves, not a certificate. None of the women have ever asked for a certificate. The mastery of technology unlocks their ability to see themselves as valuable human beings, as having power. This is one of my favorite images because it's a village chief in Togo who had an all-male village council that advised him, and they were sort of the hierarchy of this community called the Gome Seva. And after the solar engineers came back and electrified the entire community, he fired his whole council and has replaced them with the women. So we don't talk about gender, right? I don't go to the community and say, I'm here to equalize gender. This is not what we do. We construct a social norm change that involves a deep gender shift at the end of it, but it comes through competency. They become heroes, role models for their family and every girl and every young boy in their community. Most importantly, they become leaders. They see themselves as leaders. The first step to being a leader is seeing yourself as one. Now, for those of you who happen to be thinking, oh, that's nice, they do that thing with one woman at a time. Today, there are 3,000 women barefoot solar engineers. They are present in 96 countries. They deliver 1.4 gigawatts of renewable energy every year, and that's the same as a nuclear power plant puts out. So exponentiality in thinking becomes absolutely essential if we want to drive scale. And we're a tiny organization. Our operating budget's not even $1 million a year. So it's not about money. It's not about ego. It's about partnership. It's about understanding how to work in networks, about understanding who has power and how you can use and leverage that power. Now, they have blown away every expectation we ever had for them. And like anybody who learns something, if you have children, they go, what's next? So, of course, there we are. It's what's next. What's next is this. The women were all doing economic activity. They would come to us and we'd talk to them through the course of their 6 months, and they were all raising chickens, weaving mats, making baskets. Women are really industrious. But most of them said to us, we can't earn consistent income. We make money one month, we lose money the next. We never know if we're really earning anything. It doesn't seem like we're really gaining anywhere. So we began to break down what it was that makes a great entrepreneur. Because in my head, as an entrepreneur, for profit, now in this hybrid sector, I realized that the same words that we use to describe great entrepreneurs, my mamas have that. All of them. Tenacity, resilience, innovation, an ability to think creatively from a problem to a solution. These are all the things they have. So what is the difference? And I realized it was a lot around critical thinking skills. I have an incredible team in Telonia, and they spent nearly 2 years breaking down what were the things women needed to know about themselves or about the world around them that would empower them with enough knowledge to start to see themselves as more able to run and operate a micro-enterprise. So there are 8 workshops, 8 sets of the enriched curriculum, and they start with financial literacy and financial inclusion, digital skill use, a knowledge of their own human rights and how they should be treated, micro-enterprise skill building, women's health, menstrual and reproductive health, nutrition. If you're a woman and the income in your family relies on you, you have to be healthy. You have to know what to eat and how to keep yourself well. Environmental stewardship. What's your role in your community and your family to teach positive environmental practices? Sustainable livelihoods, and I'll show you how that played out. And then most importantly, how do you develop your own agency, vision for yourself, have aspirations, articulate those? If you're a woman in the developing world, every single person of influence in your life, i.e. the men in your life, brother, father, husband, they're always telling you what you can't do. So you, when you're asked, what would you like to do? For many women, that's the first time in their life anybody ever asked them what they want for themselves. It's a very emotional workshop. They cry. It's hard to stand up and say what I want, because that immediately means I have to figure out, can I get there? So we have a responsibility when we ask that question to make sure we help them to get there. This is a micro-enterprise workshop, so business canvas, as you all know it. But we do it orally, and then we prompt with some written words. This is one taking place in the Pacific, so of course the women can read there for the most part. And we do them as community activities, collective activities. So you're not doing your business canvas. You're visioning a business canvas collectively with other women, because you can't get a business of any kind off the ground in a small community without your whole community behind you. Everything is digitized. All the modules in the enriched curriculum are digitized to allow to cross the barrier of language. So it doesn't matter if that curriculum's going out to Guatemala, or it's going to Burkina Faso, or it's going to the Pacific Islands, same curriculum. And voila, they have become entrepreneurs. Now we've got another journey to go on. Together with our in-house R&D team, which is also made up of non-formally educated people, they have brought a line of solar home lighting products to the market called Bindi. They have developed them into kits, which look like IKEA. This year, Bindi Solar will ship to 30 countries around the world. It is the only line of solar hardware designed, fabricated, distributed, repaired, and maintained only by women. And that's not all, because they're busy, our solar mamas. They have brought to market, together with a brilliant young team of dedicated beekeepers, and the only way to describe Pierre is passionate about bees. I have a wonderful young man from France who's come to join us, and in the last 3 years, they've brought a vibrant, now profitable honey business across 3 countries, 5 states in India, to the market under our label Be Barefoot. They have trained thousands of women to be beekeepers as secondary livelihood, ensuring consistent flows of income into their households. The women are trained to train. So they train other solar mamas, they train other beekeepers, and that network is growing in and of itself now. We guarantee to buy the product, we bring it to market, we brand it, and we pay them the highest price in the competitive market for what they grow, provided they grow to our standards. And now we're on coffee. So this is our Indian coffee. We're growing coffee and producing it in 3 states in India and in Guatemala, hopefully in Kenya and the Pacific Islands in the next 2 years. It is the only solar roasted, all women produced coffee. You're getting the theme here, I can see. But it is a 0 carbon footprint product. Some of the women in the local villages in Rajasthan came to us and they said, we have this chronic problem. There are millions of women in India that are anemic. It's a genetic as well as a dietary issue. And that causes things like low birth weight in children, which causes poor academic outcomes, really a serious problem in India. And they said, but we had a solution for this. 50 years ago, we used to make this thing, this mixture, And we gave it to our children, and it worked. And I said, but why did we stop doing that? Well, it wasn't, it didn't come in a fancy package, and it wasn't a sort of westernized product. So somehow this indigenous idea had been devalued. So we reinvigorated that with the help of one of my team, another young person who's come to join me named Bidyapathy, who has worked tirelessly to create a nutritional supplement from that original indigenous recipe that has now been licensed by the government of India, so we can sell and distribute that. And they've set up a business enterprise model that means women in a community sell that to other people in the community and through those communities as a way to earn some money and also to develop a product that was serving a huge need. So this is what I call need-based innovation. And I think it's absolutely critical that we have our ears open. It wasn't something Barefoot classically did, but it became so clearly an extension, a natural extension of our own discovery and our own learning that we paid attention, put some money and resources behind it, and now have something highly effective. After 3 months of taking this, you're no longer anemic. If you're a farmer and a woman and going out in your field every day in 45-degree weather in Rajasthan, for instance, and you're anemic, you have a miserable quality of life. And here's something that's made from local ingredients, things that are grown in the fields behind these houses. So we lose, I think, a lot of the ancient knowledge and information that communities had by simply not taking the time to sit in the community and really listen to them and listen to what they really feel would be effective for them. We're so busy trying to be the expert, We know how it should go. We know how it should be. Actually, they know. They know. And what they need us for is to take what they know and develop that and be able to build on it and bring the resources they need around it and the structure they need around it. So our job, it's not always to do. Our job is to listen first. And this is a critical... Now, I thought it might be interesting, because this is a room of fellow social entrepreneurs, to explain a little bit about how we work. Because these programs sound really interesting on the outside, but how does that happen? Because it's not an accident. And I always resist this irritating idea that people who are really smart do business and make a lot of profit money that gets distributed, and people who are just really nice, they do those social things. I don't like this idea, clearly, because I think the problems are huge, and they're complex, and they're networked, and they're urgent, and we need the best, smartest, brightest people putting their minds at the challenges that we all face as human beings. And that is not light work, and it's not feel-good work. It's work that takes enormous courage and tenacity. And I think we have to out that in some moments. So I always like to talk about the how we work. So we are working on a systems change in our solar area. What are the problems? Oh, we got big problems. No availability of products in last mile communities. No maintenance and repair. No availability of credit without a credit history. No salesperson at the last mile. No repair and maintenance. No financing for people at the last mile, because they're risky. They're not risky. In rural communities, you pay back what you borrow, or your reputation with your community is zero. People don't fail to pay back. Or if they do, it's because they've been set up on an unrealistic expectation of how to do that. So these are the barriers, right? There's big ones we have to innovate around. So you have to work in a systems change approach. And you can't pretend that technology doesn't exist. We have to use the technology we have in the best, most leveraged and impactful way. So we start with product fabrication. What's the right product? And we let them tell us. 1,000 women from rural communities come to Telonia to evaluate 100 products. And they rate them for value, for money. Would they buy them? And then we listen to that. It's not about what we want. It's about what they need. We work on marketing, but what does that mean in rural last-mile communities? We work on credit worthiness. We're looking at things like trust-based credit. algorithms that load on a 3G mobile phone and track the number of calls you make, who you make them to, and how far away they are, how much mobile phone money you use every month. All those things give us a picture. Will you be connected? Do you have a network? Do you have reliability? Will you be able to pay back? And how much? Using it different ways to finance through smart subsidy. The answer is not that a very poor person should only get a tiny little solar lantern, right? Just because you're poor, you can't have a home lighting system? Light is a human right. You can't do anything properly. You can't learn, you can't create economic uplift without access to light in the evenings, especially for women who watch children or farm all day. So understanding and unpacking how we level the playing field, but in an intelligent way, using data to show a donor or an investor. This is why we need a $60 subsidy for these communities. It's based on hard data and clear fact. The only way you get the data is to integrate the technology. Sales, how does that happen? What's the right approach? How do women leverage their natural abilities? How do we work in the repair and maintenance? And then finally, circling back around to the data collection. What's the impact? How much do incomes go up? How do people function differently? Does their social structure change? Are they more likely to start other kinds of enterprises? So using, again, big data to connect that loop. So it's about bringing technical mastery, the skills and critical thinking that empowerment activities give us, and then using that to naturally lead to entrepreneurial skill sets. So it is not a simple model, and it's not really a model that happens accidentally. We use human-centric design thinking. We have an extraordinary team of young, highly educated people who work hand in hand, completely respectfully, with rural folks who have wisdom and knowledge we don't have. I'd like to finish by sharing with you a few of the things that I've learned, unlearned, and relearned with my economically challenged sisters in the developing world in the last 9 years. I have unlearned an unconscious bias I had to those who do not have a formal education like me. I have unlearned a mediocrity of thinking in this work that I never knew I possessed. As I look at the faces of thousands of women across the developing world, I have learned humility in a completely different context. Our arrogance, our unbelievable arrogance, stops us from seeing their resilience, their tenacity, their courage, the human capacity that sits in 40% of the population on the planet who remains largely underutilized as part of our solutions. I have learned that the people we think are least educated have the highest adaptive intelligence, and learned that the courage to master a piece of technology is not dependent on a formal education. It seems to me that it's time we demand our technology companies to create more pathways for inclusion, not just for those differently abled, but for those differently educated. Your education is not something you get in a school. It's one kind of education. Your education comes from your family, your community, your faith group, your peers. And we don't have a system yet that values that education. Recognizing that the adaptive intelligence of the bottom billion is actually our key to unlocking solutions to many of the challenges facing us is now exponentially critical. Because ultimately, it will only be when my solar mamas are sitting at the design table next to the MIT and Stanford graduates designing technology that is grounded in human need that we will truly have a revolution that will include everyone on the road to the planet and people thriving. Now, never in history have we been faced with the complexity of challenges to the very things that create the conditions human beings need to truly thrive. Never has our engagement as citizens, and every definition of that word, both small and large, been more critical than it is right now. The need for leadership, a need often unmet, is evident when we encounter uncertainty that demands adaptive, heuristic, or innovative responses, where past practices are breached, new threats loom, a sudden opportunity might appear, social conditions change, and technology changes the rules, and so on and so on. As fellows, you must see yourselves as leaders, accepting a responsibility to create the conditions that enable others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. As a community of social entrepreneurs, we cannot just think about our individual enterprise, our individual idea. We must embrace a more collective whole. We must think about what we are doing and how that fits to the larger movement, and are we aiding and moving that movement ahead? For me, leading a social innovation organization that has, to a large extent, catalyzed a movement of thought has required taking a lot of risks, learning, unlearning, and relearning pretty fearlessly at a pretty fast rate. To balance the tension between criticality and hope, between the experience of the world's pain that I see every day and the incredible opportunity that it also offers. I believe that a deep desire for change must be coupled with the capacity to make that change happen. Tena koto, tena koto, tena koto.